Hi guys, so in this video I just want to do a quick example of how I would go about breaking down a particular article into concepts and flashcards and things using RemNote. I'm going to use my own article as an example, which is going to be quite interesting for me, I think. And hopefully it will be useful to show you how you can actually get started using RemNote because it can be confusing for some people. The first thing I'll do is I'll create a new document. And what I've done is I've exported the article that I wrote as a PDF, and I'll upload it into RemNote so that I can annotate the article and create flashcards that are connected to parts of the article. So here I'll select the article. Okay, great. So now I've got the article imported. I'll skip over the introduction and we can just get straight into creating flashcards from the more conceptual side of the article. So the purpose of this article is basically just to introduce people to some of the fundamental ideas in computer science. And so it starts off by discussing the concept of universal data encoding, the ability for a computer to represent any data and be able to store any kind of data that we want to process with it. Actually, what I'll do here, I'll give the this document rem, a title, and let's just call it functions. Well, and then if I just click on the bullet notes, then it will give me a bullet and I can start writing. And the first thing I'll do is take this numbers and data section and create a highlight and copy it over here. And then I can type the slash command and type H1 to turn it into a heading. And now I can use that approach to basically organize my notes. So if I create a new rem by pressing enter and then press tab, I can indent under the heading and type notes under there. All right, so I've refreshed my memory of the numbers and data section. Now we can get into how I would create flashcards from this if it was an article that I was reading for the first time. So the first thing I think that's useful to do is to try and recognize the important concepts that are being discussed in this section. A concept is like an important idea or thought or an important object in a particular domain. So if I just look through this first section and point out the important concepts for me, that would be things like binary, computer memory, let's see, maybe number systems, and maybe at the bottom, yeah, these two concepts of universal data encoding and computational universality. So let's start with computer memory. What I'll do is I'll just type computer memory like this. And then in RemNote, if you type /TC, that's the shortcode for turning something into a concept. So if I press enter, computer memory is now a concept. Once I've got my first concept, now I need to think of the properties of the concept that this article is trying to explain to me. So first of all, there's an analogy between computer memory and Excel spreadsheets, which is quite useful. I love analogies. I think they're the best way to bootstrap your understanding of a new field by connecting concepts in that new field to things you already know. So let's see how we can go about encoding this analogy as a flashcard using RemNote. What I will do is I could start by just saying analogy and creating a descriptor by pressing the semicolon key twice. And then I can type something like an Excel like a column in a cell head heap with So on the right here, you can see this preview button, and you can see how that will look when you actually come to review it in the queue. So you get the context of the name of the article, which is a document called Functions Describe the World. You get the context of the section this flashcard and concepts were created from, numbers and data. And then you're shown computer memory, analogy, and you're trying to recall the analogy which helps you understand computer memory. And you can see the answer here. So I will tell you from experience that although this seems like it would be easy to recall, the issue is that there's lots of possible analogies that you can make between computer memory and other concepts. If you think about it, for any two ideas in the brain, you can make some kind of connection between them, even if it's very arbitrary and not really meaningful. So in cases where there are an infinite number of connections or an infinite number of possible answers to a flashcard, I think what you need to do is to give yourself a hint about the answer. So probably on the front of the flashcard, I'd want something like this, just to narrow down the possible scope of analogies without directly giving myself the answer. And then, since I've used the word Excel in the question, I can remove some of the redundant words about Excel here. So I could just say like a column. Oh, oops. Like a column with cells containing sequences of zeros and ones. So the significance of this, a shortening of the flashcard, is that you always want your flashcards to be what's known as atomic, testing a single idea in the most concise way possible, making the connection between neurons in your brain as simple as possible, which is the bro science way of saying it. But yeah, from experience, you always want your flashcards to be simple. You much prefer reviewing more flashcards that are simpler than fewer flashcards that test lots of different ideas and contain lots of text. Those become very painful to review because you just can't retain them in your long-term memory. So once more, let's look at the preview and check that it looks good. Numbers and data, computer memory. It looks good to me, so we can continue. So the second idea that we're introduced to is the concept that computers use binary, typically. And there's a physical hardware reason why computers use binary, which is that those two states can easily be represented by distinct and stable levels of voltage. So let's create another descriptor called, let's say, uses which number system. And then I can give the answer as binary. So let me show you how that looks again. You can see how RemNote's concept descriptor framework allows you to create very concise cards, because for both of these flashcards, I'm reusing the same structure in my notes, and I'm only adding on these additional descriptors at the bottom, which you can read very easily. They read quite well in English. So computer memory uses which number system. But that's kind of the power of the concept descriptor framework that RemNote's pioneered. It allows you to create these very concise cards that also read reasonably well in plain English as well. So you can keep your notes and your flashcards in the same kind of system, this writing style. Some people have accused it of being overly formal or looking ugly in your notes, but you need to find a compromise between creating notes and flashcards at the same time, because it's better to have, I think, the concept descriptor framework, which balances notes and flashcards at the same time, rather than having your notes and flashcards be separated, because then you end up with way more text, which becomes much more unmanageable over time. So here for this flashcard, you can see that I didn't choose to include the explanation on the back side of this card. And it comes back to what I just said earlier, which is that you always want your flashcards to be testing a single idea. So here, I'm only interested in which number system is being used, not the explanation as to why. For the explanation, a nice pattern you can use is to indent a rem under this one and say, why? And now here I can say, I can probably actually get away with just copying directly from the article here. So okay, actually I realized that if I did copy from the article, it would create an answer that was way too long. So instead, what I'll do is I will summarize this in my own words and then create a pin to the answer, because I think it's interesting to have the reference for this. So, okay, no. Okay, I've decided that the core reason is, the core reason is that it makes the computer more resistant to small fluctuations in power supply. I think that's the core one. So I will do a highlight here. Oh, there we go. No, I've decided that's wrong as well. Here's the issue. There are two reasons why. It's not just a single reason. So the two reasons are, one, it can easily be represented by two distinct and stable levels of voltage. So it's easy to represent electrically. And then the second reason, which is an extension of the first one, is that this makes the computer more resistant to small fluctuations in power supply. So there are two choices here. I could say why something like this, and then say can easily represented using two stable levels of voltage, 5 volts for 1, 0 volts for 0. And now I have a choice. I could either indent again under here and create another sort of Y flashcard under this one. But I prefer this approach, which is to just make a sibling of this one and say like Y stability as the hint, and say like this. And the reason is just that I like to minimize the amount of indentations and hierarchy in the flashcards. So if I had more time, I would probably come up with better descriptors, like rather than saying Y and then having a hint in parentheses, I might come up with a way to express this. But for now, this will do. As long as I can recall the answer and I'm not giving away too much in the question stem, then I think it's reasonable. So now, interestingly, in the final paragraph of this section, we're introduced to the idea that binary isn't the only number system that you could use for a computer. So one interesting thing that you might like to do with your flashcards is edit the descriptors in a small way to make it encode this idea in your other flashcards. So for computer memory, instead of uses which number system, you could say generally uses which number system, because the article is hinting that there's the possibility of computers with other number systems, like with base 10, the normal number system, and then goes on to try and create a computer with just unary. So let's say generally or typically uses which number system. And then the final flashcard that you might like to make from this section would be something to encode this idea that the specific substrate used for the computer memory doesn't really matter, at least in theory, as long as it supports these two properties, universal data encoding and computational universality. So here I could say, like underlying number system, like criteria, underlying must support, something like that. And here, again, I have a choice. I could do a list card by pressing enter here and giving two answers. So universal data encoding. Sorry, this is getting in the way. Okay there. Okay. Yeah, universal data encoding and computational universality. Universality. But again, you have to think of things in terms of your future self and whether you're actually really going to be able to remember these two things just based on the prompt. So if I look at this again, because again, it's you always have to think like, is the answer that I've provided here the only possible answer, the only reasonable answer to the question? Or is it variable in the sense that there are many possible answers to this question that could reasonably be given? Especially as I gain more knowledge in this area, I might have a more refined understanding and I might be able to come up with other reasons, other criteria a number system should support if it's to be used as computer memory. So again, I think we need to refine the question in order to narrow the space of possible answers. So for example, I could say this: two universalities underlying number system must support. And then I've massively narrowed the space of possible answers, or at least I think so at this stage, because yeah, this has just made the set of possible answers a lot smaller. And I could reasonably expect that in a year, or as the intervals between flashcard reviews becomes much longer, into years and let's say decades, hopefully, I will still probably be able to remember based on this question stem. And I'm also not giving away too much in the question. It's just enough that universalities provides enough of a hint without giving me too much information that makes recalling it trivial. That's really what you need to balance. It's the making the set of answers small whilst also not giving away the answer. Okay, yeah, I hope that's useful. Once you've gone through, you've created some flashcards, you can obviously click on the practice button here and it will take you to the queue and you can start revising the flashcards. Yeah, I hope this was useful. If it was useful, let me know and I can go through more parts of the article or parts of different articles and turn them into flashcards. Yeah. All right. See you in the next one.